our topic this year, or this time, is future green ports. So we're going to talk about what green means, what are ports, and how we can make them more sustainable in the future, which is pretty exciting. And so today's agenda, next slide, please. We're going to do a quick little intro to what DeepSense is and our hosting partners, ShiftKey, The Pier, and Cove. A quick little intro to the challenge to kind of get some good ideas in your head, and then we're going to throw it to our speakers, and hopefully that you'll have some great questions that you can then ask the speakers. We'll do a Q&A afterwards, so keep those questions. You can drop them in the chat as they come up, or in the Q&A. We'll keep track of that, and then we can ask them afterwards. Once the speaker Q&A is over, we're going to do a quick challenge review, and then talk about some data, and then we're going to go if you have any final questions about the challenge, and then the officially kicks off. The data challenge will start, and we'll review final dates and everything that we need. So just a quick kind of who are we? Who are all these different organizations? So like I said, I work for DeepSense. So DeepSense is a project out of Dalhousie University here in Halifax. And what we do is we work with ocean companies, talk to them, figure out what their data challenges are, and then we're going to set up a project to help solve those data challenges. The ultimate goal is for the companies to be doing artificial intelligence or machine learning, but all companies have different data maturity levels. So the projects vary from data visualizations, data analytics, data mining, cleaning, all the way up to AI and machine learning. So we set up those projects, and then we're going to find students to do the projects as an internship or a co-op for like 4, 6, or 8 months, kind of what best works for the students and the companies. So we want to help make a smarter ocean economy and introduce the ocean to people who wouldn't necessarily consider working in the oceans. But we also do events like our data challenge here to kind of show the opportunities there are in the ocean world. We have webinars that we run. We have a mentorship program called STEM Connector. So there's a lot of cool opportunities over at DeepSense. I'll pass it over to Kat. I'm going to talk about Cove.
Thanks, Lucia. So yeah, hi everyone. My name is Kat Mataya, and I'm the Education and Outreach Manager at Cove. So Cove is located in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, and we're an innovation hub for marine technology companies. So we are basically an ecosystem for all these companies to help create and develop new technology to help us really understand and manage and monitor the ocean better. So that really does range from water quality sensors to really understand what's going on in the water, even to different types of vehicles to help us explore all the parts of the ocean we have yet to even discover. So there's a lot of different technology that's being developed, and part of my role is to help get students to understand all the things available within the marine sector. So I do a lot of education programs for elementary and high school level students to really get some experience around oceans and just an interest and inspire spark some interest in the oceans. And then we also provide career exploration opportunities as well. So giving students an opportunity to see all the different careers open in the marine sector and doing work experiences like our summer internship program. So we do a lot to try and get students to consider different opportunities available in the marine sector for all disciplines. So similar to DeepSense, we want students in business as well as engineering and computer science. And so this is a great challenge to bring all these different minds and perspectives together. So that's kind of an overarching run through of Cove.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kat. Emily, you want to talk ShiftKey?
Absolutely. Thanks, Lucia. I'm Emily Fenton. I'm the manager of ShiftKey Labs. ShiftKey is a local nonprofit based at Dalhousie University in the Faculty of Computer Science. And our aim is to boost innovation and entrepreneurship amongst tech and computer science students across Nova Scotia. And we do this in a couple of ways. One of them is events like this one, so challenges and hackathons, which I always feel like bring together a lot of the different skill sets that you need if you want to pursue entrepreneurship. So that's skills development, it's teamwork, it's leadership, all those good things, networking, that's sort of fun stuff. And we do other kinds of events too. So more skills building workshops, boot camps, networking events, and that kind of thing. And then lastly, we also do startup support. So if you have an early stage tech startup or just an idea floating in the back of your head, we can help you sort of round that out and see if you can take it any further. So those are the ways ShipKey supports students across Nova Scotia. And I'm really happy to be here tonight. So looking forward to seeing what you guys come up with.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily. And Sherry, you want to talk peer?
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for coming out and virtually here tonight. I'm Sherry Scully. I'm with the Pier. I'm actually in the Pier right now, and we are a living lab, another innovation center similar to Cove. And but we work specifically in the marine transportation, supply chain, and logistics industries. Some of the work that we do here in workforce development is we focus again on youth engagement in the industry, some career coaching, mentoring, and also quite a wide range of work integrated learning experiences. And this one that we are doing right now is a good example of that here with a hackathon. So we are a living lab representing the Port of Halifax. And so we have set this challenge today for you around making a greener port, and really looking forward to some of the ideas you come up with.
Awesome. Thanks, Sherry. So that's a good idea of who we have here and why we brought everyone together and are hosting this Ocean of Data challenge. But now let's get into it. What is our challenge? So we can go to the next slide. First off, the question is, we're using green a lot, and sometimes people might not know exactly what green means. It gets thrown around quite often. But basically, when we're talking green, we're not talking about painting ourselves green or anything like that. But it's more about kind of living sustainably, finding that balance between how your life impacts the earth and your surroundings, and being mindful enough to help maintain an ecological balance. So we unfortunately live in a very linear economy. So a lot of the stuff that we use kind of goes through and we kind of throw it out and it's done, and that's the end life cycle. So we want to try to switch to a circular economy and making those environmentally friendly choices, recycling, all these different words that you see in this kind of go green word cloud here all kind of add up and are found under green. And this is really important. We want to make sure that we're living as green or as sustainable as possible to be able to help support our planet as we are facing challenges of pollution and climate change and overpopulation. So all these things are really important to bring together, and being able to know about our impact on the planet is really important, especially with our oceans, because even though we might not interact with the oceans physically every day and like go sailing or swimming or anything, we do interact with them all the time, because about 80% of the goods that we use are coming on container ships and are going through the different ports, going across the ocean to get to us from various different countries. So about, like I said, 80% come from ships. So that's why we want to make sure that the way that they're moving through the ocean and into ports and around the cities is also green. Next slide, please. So what is a green port? So similar, taking that word green and now putting it in a port perspective. So ports are basically anywhere where the ships come in. So a lot of big cities on the water, they will have their own ports. So we have the Port of Halifax. We also have Scott here from the Port of Virginia. But these are all ports because this is where shipping goods come in, cruise ships come in, a variety of different things. And having a green port encourages environmentally friendly and sustainable operations, a lot of green technologies, using low and zero carbon alternatives to fossil fuels. And another one that people don't know about is green shipping corridors. So Canada actually signed back in 2022 a declaration on zero emission shipping by 2050. And in order to do that, we have a long way to go to get to that zero emission, but one step is ensuring that we're moving towards having greener ports and having kind of more sustainable, more environmentally friendly ports, and ensure that we have zero emissions. So where there is a shipping route that is on which there is zero carbon emission ships and other emission reduction programs are deployed, this is considered a green shipping corridor. And these reductions are then measured and enabled through different actions and policies. So Halifax is trying to ensure that we become more green because, like I said, it's important for our planet and our oceans. Next slides. So Halifax, the Port of Halifax is part of the Green Marine Certification Program. And this is a program that's supported by various environmental organizations and government agencies. And they did a kind of review of how the Port of Halifax works in 2021. And you can see the scale there. It's 1 to 5. So 5 kind of being at the top, that illustrates excellence and leadership. So across in 2019, when they first did this, the average score was about 2.9. The Port of Halifax got 4.2, which puts us in a leadership position, which is really important because we're covering this, as you can see, Green Marine Certification covers community impacts, environmental leadership, greenhouse gas emissions, spill prevention and stormwater management, which is one maybe people don't think of when they think of green, and underwater noise as well, and waste management. So all these different points are really important towards moving towards a more green port. Now, Halifax is really special because it is based, we have the Halifax Peninsula, and we have 2 shipping terminals. We have one, if you know Halifax, by Point Pleasant Park, all the way at the end of Barrington. We have 1 shipping terminal, and then we have a whole city with people living in it, living their lives, going to school, going to work, businesses thriving. And then on the way to the other side of the peninsula, we then have a 2nd shipping terminal under the McKay Bridge. So all the trucks, you'll see them a lot of times going through downtown Halifax, and this causes a lot of congestion, noise, carbon emissions. It has an impact on the community. So we're really a living port city. We have 2 shipping terminals on either side of the city, and we have to make sure that we're working together, and Halifax Port Authority wants to find creative ways to conduct business that have the least environmental impact on the environment, on the community, and moving towards net zero. So we're really in a unique position, and there's a lot of opportunities, and I'm interested to see the ideas that you might come up with, which brings us to our challenge. So next slide. How do we create a greener port? So bringing together the City of Halifax and the Port of Halifax in a more green and more efficient and sustainable way. But our challenges tend to be pretty broad because we want to make sure that there's enough leniency for you guys to be creative and come up with new ideas. We don't want to limit you. So we have a very broad question, and then we break it down into 3 streams that we can see on the next slide. There we go. Challenge streams. So we have on the water, in the port, and around the port. So on the water, if you're thinking of like those green shipping corridors, how ships move from port to port, the environmental impact of the ship industry, the cruise industry on Halifax, and then in the port. So once the ships get here, what happens to the goods? How can we make it more green, kind of as trucks are moving, as cranes are unloading the cargo, all that, and then around the port. So that's kind of looking at the impact the port has on the community. So like I said, those trucks driving through downtown Halifax, looking at train alternatives. We only have 1 rail. How do we optimize the movement between the 2 different ports? So all these different streams. So this kind of gives you a broad idea of kind of what to think about as we listen to our speakers. So we have our overall question. We're thinking about kind of the impacts and how we can make operations more green on the water, in the port, and around the port. So enough of me talking. I'm going to start passing it over to our speakers. So our next slide, we'll have a list of all our speakers. Our first speaker will be Derek Whalen. He is the Director of Information and Technology Services at the Halifax Port Authority. He's been a strategic IT leader with 20 years of experience. Derek collaborates with business executives, IT team members, technology partners, and port stakeholders to develop a multi-year IT strategic roadmap, talent management plan, and cybersecurity resilience program. Derek's team has recently helped lead the implementation of port management and information systems. So we can stop sharing our screen and we can pass it off to you, Derek. Oh, you're muted.
All right, I think I'm unmuted.
Yes.
And you can see my display.
Yes, we can. Looks great.
Well, thanks everyone for the invitation to be here. this is exciting, and I have to say that working with people from all sectors and all areas, especially people coming out of school and in programs, we need your help. No one can solve these problems alone. So collaboration, and that's a message right from our CEO. So just a little bit about the Port of Halifax, and we've had a great intro already, so I won't go too far into this. And it may seem simple enough to move containers, off a vessel and into different locations, but it's extremely complex, and it's complex because of a number of reasons. But one of the reasons I'd highlight it's complex because there's many stakeholders, there's many partners. It's not one company. It's really about leadership and about influence. And the Halifax Port Authority is really, as I see it, a facilitator. We don't do a lot of the action, we don't do a lot of the work, but we are facilitating and we are collaborating to improve efficiency along the way. A number of things that we're working on, and this came out today during our annual general meeting, is a 50-year plan for sustainable growth. And sometimes when I mention a 50-year plan, people have a hard time getting their head around that. Some companies struggle with a 2 or 3 year plan, but it's really important as a port city to look holistically at how we're going to be in this business of supply chain and logistics, but also be responsible as one port city. And you have to really look forward into the future and look at growth and look at your future goals with your partners. One of the things I think is very clear to us, and I've been at the port for 4 years, and every day is a learning experience, but we are part of Canada's global trade, and a very essential part. We have a unique opportunity here at the East Coast of Canada. We have a deep water port. We can take some of the biggest vessels in the world. And I think you saw reference to that just earlier in one of the slides that I was going to reference as well, that we are an ultra gateway. And what that means is we can take some of the biggest vessels in the world. And in fact, in 2021, as you may have noticed in an earlier slide, we had the biggest vessel ever to come to the Eastern Seaboard, and that includes the US ports, and they stopped in Halifax first. And that was 3.5 football fields. I don't know if you play football, but that's a long run to get down that line. And you got to go 3.5 times to get to the end of that vessel. We measure things by cargo throughput, in particular container cargo, which is our biggest opportunity to move goods through Halifax. And so if you look at those containers on trucks, we measure them in 20-foot lengths, and if you added them all up in 2022, there would have been 600,000 of those moving through Halifax. And we're continuing to plan for growth on that. Cruise is another area that many of you are aware of if you're in Halifax, and that's continuing to grow. It stopped, as we know, for a while, but 325,000 passengers are planning to come through this year. One of the ways that we operate more and more, and it's in the pier where Sherry is what we have a joint operations center, and that's where different companies that operate independently are coming together to collaborate, share information, and try to operate and plan more effectively together. So just to highlight a few things, and I'll keep time in mind here. One of the things we're working on, and it's a multi-year plan, and it's a collective effort, not just within the Port of Halifax, but with many partners and many vendors, is a digital transformation. It's really about continuous improvement. And as I mentioned, earlier, we implemented a port information management system called Port Control in 2022. I guess we went live at the beginning of 2022. And it's really helping us with automation on marine operations, vessel scheduling, and increasing efficiency. But most importantly, it's collecting information that we can now use to measure. So as we're looking at some of these sustainability goals, we now have a platform that can track this. In the past, and you may be surprised by this, a lot of this was done, the old-fashioned way, phone calls and even fax machines, if you can believe that, in recent times, and email and so forth. But it's very hard to measure and very hard to really get a handle on improvements. One of the big things we're doing this year is working on a data integration platform, which I think ties heavily into some of the work that many of you are doing, as we get one source of truth where we can have data that's consistently collected and shared so we have better visibility. I can't forget about cybersecurity, and it is tied to everything, because if we don't protect the data, we don't protect the systems, then they're not going to serve us any value, and they're going to be under attack. The threats are increasing, as we probably all know, and we all have our own experiences there. Now, something that I know is really important to people like Sherry and all of you on the phone call is workforce development. We're focused on our own staff, and we're doing a lot of technology change. And part of sustainability for us is to be able to have staff that are learning and developing with some of the most recent technologies, so that we can collect this data and share this data. But without staff, we just can't do it. And we're always looking to work with co-op programs. We're always looking to bring in talent, because it is scarce and it's going to continue to be scarce. And so we have a very strategic way of looking at that. Data literacy, I think, we could spend a long time talking about that, but the technology movement is happening so quick, data is moving so quick, that a lot of organizations are still trying to figure out how to leverage that data. And that's really a culture shift, and it takes a lot of change management and a lot of leveraging examples of why data is important, and give more visuals to people. And I won't talk a lot about the peers, that was already mentioned, and that's where Sherry is. We have our IT team that moved into the peer last year, and it's been an exciting opportunity. I'm going to finish up just quickly here, knowing that I'm coming up on time, and just talk about what our goals are. And our goals are to be significant in our sustainability program, where we are committed to reducing energy consumption and emissions. And our goals are significant, and we can't underestimate the challenge it's going to take to get there. So what I've listed below are just some of the things we're thinking about and working on, but we really need a lot of help to really leverage these, whether it's transition to clean energy or alternative fuels or electrification and all the other items that I have here. One of the things we need is data, because we can't measure where we are against where we're going, unless we get that data. And so we need that baseline data, and we have different programs in place. We're measuring sound, we're measuring wind, particulate. There's just a number of things that we could talk about. But really, I'd like to hear from all of you and what we can do to make Halifax a more green port. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Derek. That was a great overview of everything. And port control, I have a list of data I'm going to share later, and I definitely always include the port control data, because there's a lot of awesome, so many, like it's overwhelming how much data is in there, which is pretty neat. All right, so our next speaker is Cameron Duvall. He is a driven and ambitious Bachelor of Commerce student majoring in finance at Dalhousie University with a passion for business and a keen interest in the tech and financial industries. Cameron has made significant strides in his professional journey. In January 2023, Cameron joined DataFX Inc. as a business development analyst, and he is progressing in his academic and professional journey. He aspires to continue developing his expertise in technology and finance while exploring opportunities to make a significant impact in their respective industries. So Cameron, I'm going to pass it off to you. You can talk about DataFX.
Perfect. Thank you, Lucia. I'm just going to pull up my screen here. Okay, perfect. Is everyone able to see my screen here?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So we are DataFX Inc. Oh, sorry. Yeah. We're DataFX Inc., founded in 2014, headquartered in Toronto, Ontario, but we also work out of the Pier with Sherry. And we specialize in offering 3D interactive digital twin solutions to larger organizations to help them facilitate fleet maintenance, logistics and transportation, as well as cargo handling. Sorry, here running into, there we go. Okay, so first I'll touch on just pretty much about what we've been doing so far here with DataFX. Is our first big client was the Royal Canadian Navy, and we use our solutions to implement a digital maintenance management system for them, which has allowed them to streamline collaboration through the ability to view. So you're able to pull all your data into a system of these digital twins, as you can see in the pictures here of the cargo bays. And any user anywhere, as long as they have access to a web browser in Chrome, are able to pull up and see all this data shared and collaborate together, which can really impact teamwork. And here's some pictures of what we did for GE transportation. As you can see, tracking all different containers through GPS, and see in the top left here, you can see it on your phone, tablet, anything that can connect to the internet and has the ability to touch Chrome. So I will, just a fair warning, some of my slides won't completely go with what I'm saying, but bear with me here. So my role as a business development analyst, data plays a huge impact. So I use data in virtually every single part of my job, whether it's tracking how our outbound sales channels are doing, and that includes LinkedIn posting, emailing, and calling. And what you do is I take the data and consolidate that down to identify which is the best course of action to keep pursuing. Now, in terms of greener ports, digital twins can have a huge impact. So instead of having to take every idea we have and actually build it out and make it into the port in real life, we can take all that data, create a digital twin or industrial metaverse, as we like to call it, and simulate how those changes will take effect. And that can save like waste management, time, resources, a whole boatload of things that can be reduced by being able to do all of these different simulations via computer. Now, as we move along here, this is the smart dockyard system that we built for the Royal Canadian Navy. You're able to pull, I'm not sure if you can see my mouse, but in the middle picture here on the bottom, you're able to manually pull those ships around, and it will let you know when they're close to connecting with another. It'll also track coolant going through piping. So we use many different IoT systems to track flow, movement, speed, and many other different things. Now, other panelists had touched on the need for not just technical engineering and ocean science students, but a whole boatload. So you need commerce students, logistics students, the whole mix. So I got involved in this industry when I joined commerce 2 years ago. I applied for DataFX in January 2023 and immediately got involved in finding out how we can make our ports greener. And as I explained in the previous slide, some of the best way to do this, in my personal opinion, is by doing these simulations. So the ability to just, not have to go and build these products. So you're saving on labor, material, all these different aspects, and you're able to just simulate it and bring it right to your screen and everyone who's making these key decisions. This here is what we did for the Canadian Border Services Agency. So this gentleman here on the right side of your screen is manually controlling the gate at one of our borders here in Canada, just with the touch of a screen. So that goes to show the power that these systems can have, actually connecting to these real life physical assets. Here's another example. We did this for an airline. So you're able to see here the occupancy, and this is like real-time data, so that the occupancy on each plane, as well as maintenance and every other thing that goes into actually running and operating an airline. Well, thank you very much for listening to my presentation, and please don't hesitate to ask me any questions during the Q&A.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Cameron. That was great. That was a good overview of DataFX. I always forget how much you guys cover, which is really impressive. And I love that you're able to connect it to kind of the green initiatives. And you're right, like the simulations is a great way to help reduce labor and material costs, which instead of having to like waste materials and build things, it's awesome that we can like simulate it using the digital twin. So thank you. We will now move on to Scott. So Scott Whitehurst is joining from the Virginia Port Authority. He started working there in October 2015 after working in the environmental field for 20 years. As an environmental professional in Virginia, he has worked at the Department of Environmental Quality, the Virginia Beach Health Department, the City of Norfolk Department of Public Works, and the Southeastern and Public Service Authority. In his capacity as the Director of Environmental Policy and Compliance, Scott leads a small but effective team in orchestrating all the environmental permitting and compliance activities, decarbonization efforts, as well as the port's ISO 14,001 environmental management system. I butchered that. He is actively involved in the local community through volunteering for several environmental cleanup and restoration events throughout the year. And he holds a BSc and Master's in Environmental Geology. So Scott, thanks for joining us today. I will let you go at it. You said you're just going to talk, so let us hear it.
Thanks a lot, and I appreciate the opportunity. And yeah, it's amazing to hear what it took me over 20 years to do. You were able to piece it together in less than a minute. So, man, wow, time flies. But not only has time flown by for me, but time's flown by over the last almost 8 years at the Port of Virginia, because frankly, since I've started there, we've levied a ton of state as well as federal funding. And when I say a ton, we've been successful in implementing optimization projects at our 2 largest container terminals, totaling over 1.5 billion US dollars, most of which was funding from our own state here in Virginia. If you're not familiar with the Port of Virginia, and I suspect that some of you might not be, we are a container terminal primarily. There are a lot of other, obviously, ports in the US that handle a ton of other goods. Bulk facilities, for example, you may see terminals that move fuels, as well as solid bulk terminals that move coal in our area. We do have 6 terminals in the state of Virginia. 4 of them are deep marine terminals in the Hampton Roads area, which is basically at the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay, just a short distance from the Atlantic Ocean. We also have a barge facility about 90 miles up the James River in the capital of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. And then we also have an inland truck and rail facility also about an hour west of Washington, D.C. in a small town called Front Royal, Virginia. So I've, over the last 8 years almost of being with the port, we really started our transition and optimization prior to us really making it a decision to become net zero. And that has been an evolution that has happened in the last year and a half. But if you're not super familiar with container terminals and what we do, basically our business is moving boxes, and the boxes are either typically 20 yards or 40-yard boxes. And whatever can fit in a box, up to, oh gosh, a little over 60,000 pounds can be moved in one of those boxes. We also do a little bit of roll on and roll off cargo, which is cargo gets just driven right off of a ship or right on a ship. We also do a little bit of out of gauge cargo. That's anything that cannot fit inside of one of those 20 or 40-yard boxes. So we have 2 main container terminals, one in Portsmouth, Virginia, and one just across the Elizabeth River in Norfolk, Virginia. Norfolk International Terminals is our largest container terminal. Combined, our total volume usually runs about number 3 on the east coast of Virginia. Last year, 2022, we did about 3.7 million TEUs. TEU stands for a 20-foot equivalent unit. TEU is that 20-yard box that I was just mentioning. So that 3.7 million is 3.7 million of the 20-yard boxes or the equivalent running across our 2 largest container facilities. So about 8 years ago, one of the first projects we did was start experimenting with reservation systems as well as expanded gate operations. And judging by our air emissions studies that we typically do about every 5 or so years, truck traffic was not necessarily the highest, but it seemed to be some low-hanging fruit for us at the time. And some of the things I'm going to talk about in the next few minutes are not necessarily the best thing for all ports. I can tell you that Halifax has some very forward-leaning policies. I've looked through a number of y'all's sustainability reports, and it's impressive. And I think what you'll probably find is that you hear a lot of the same sort of information from me this evening, and that is it takes time to make these changes. It takes a lot of money. And as Derek and Cameron pointed out as well, it takes data. It takes good data. And we're right now benchmarking our efforts off of 2017 data. And I can tell you the reason we made that selection is because we knew that the data was reliable going back to 2017. And so our optimization projects have really, when I say optimization projects, have primarily focused on efficiencies on the terminal as well as electrifying the terminals. Right now, all of our big ship-to-shore cranes that you see, if you think about a box that's being moved off of a huge container ship, it's being moved by an electric crane. Its box is set down on the wharf. It's picked up by a hybrid shuttle carrier. So the hybrid shuttle carriers we use, we have deployed 90 of those so far. They took the place of diesels that we had been using for many years. They're about 90 to 92% cleaner than a tier 2 to 3 diesel. It's taken us 7 years to make that transition. Like I said, 100 units. We've got 10 more on the way. So 90 in service, 10 on the way, 100 units. It's taken us about 7 years. One good thing about the hybrid shuttle carriers, though, is that we were able to pay those off. The premium that we paid off is in about 3 years in the diesel savings. So good bang for our buck there. We're also currently piloting yard tractors. Those are basically like a Class 8 truck that never leaves our facility. So they're an off-road truck that moves those containers around our facility. We're piloting all electrics there. Right now, one thing you guys probably will find is that right now, battery technology is really just not there for your super heavy equipment that you use on ports. Battery technology is improving, and we're seeing improvements. And we're actually, so far in our pilot with the UTRs, we're able to get up to 12 hours out of these things moving empty containers. But when you put them in the heaviest operation, for example, in a rail operation, where you're moving a lot heavier boxes, we're having trouble getting 6 hours of use out of them right now. Now, we know that those numbers are going to improve, but another big consideration right now, and somewhat of a decision point for a lot of smaller facilities, is going to be, well, do we electrify or do we use hydrogen or consider hydrogen? I've only got a few more minutes, maybe a minute or so left, but the Port of Virginia, as part of our newer optimizations and our efforts to reach our net zero goal of 2040, is really going to rely somewhat on the use of hydrogen for our heavy equipment. We think that we're prepared and ready to demonstrate hydrogen at the Port of Virginia. We're currently looking for some partners to do that. We think we may have a few. And so hand in hand with electrification as well as the use of hydrogen, we're going to conquer that net zero goal. And I think we're going to do it ahead of schedule. We've been working in the, if you don't speak greenhouse gas lingo, GHG lingo, we are working in scopes 1, 2, and 3. Scope 1 being the emissions from the equipment that you own, scope 2 being emissions from your power that you use, and scope 3 is emissions from your supply chain. So we're working in all those, within all those scopes right now. From a scope 2 standpoint, we're running at about 69% clean energy. We hope to be close to 100 by the end of this calendar year. We got a ton of scope 3 programs that we are older programs, anything from barge operations to green dray truck operations. We have a brand new funding stream for electric Class 8 dray trucks that has opened about 24 days ago. So we have a lot of projects going on. I know I've reached the end of my time. We have a ton of things going on at the Port of Virginia. Happy to discuss or answer any questions you may have. Thanks.
That's amazing. That's a lot of information. It's interesting, I think, to dive into maybe in our Q&A kind of the hydrogen versus electric discussion. But we're going to move on to our final speaker. Now, Dawn had something come up last minute, so she isn't able to join us here live, but she did record a video of her presentation, and we decided to include that because it is another kind of industry perspective that we will be sharing. So Dawn is a senior environmental engineer and a circular economy practitioner in Canada. She recently completed an MBA and is currently doing her PhD in innovation, enterprise, and the circular economy through the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and has been chosen through the foundation as a Schmidt MacArthur Fellow. She owns a consulting firm and is the Chief Innovation Officer and co-founder of Accuracy. So that is the company that she'll be speaking about today. So I'm just going to make sure to share my screen and the video. And hopefully everyone will be able to hear it. So just
Hi everyone, my name is Dawn Skinner. I am a PhD student at Dalhousie University in industrial engineering. My focus is on optimizing circular economy supply chains for cellular agriculture. And I'm also the co-founder and chief innovation officer of Accuracy, which is an early stage startup that resides in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And I'm actually sitting right now at the Port of Halifax. Before I start, I wanted to acknowledge that I am sitting in Halifax, Nova Scotia, which is located on Mi'kmaq territory, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. The people of the Mi'kmaq Nation have lived on this territory for millennia, and we acknowledge them as the present, past, and future caretakers of this land. So I wanted to provide a brief overview of Accuracy because it directly is related to supply chain sustainability. A little bit about us. Again, I am the Chief Innovation Officer. I deal with data analytics and algorithms to sort of run our proprietary engine. And my co-founder is Alison Murray, CEO. She works mostly on the front end of things, working with customers and clients, sales, keeping all of us on track for the most part. So both of us have about 20 years of experience in sustainability and environmental engineering. And so we bring a lot of expertise in those fields to Accuracy. We also have a technical team. We have Dan Dickinson, who's our technical advisor, and we have a really great relationship and partnership with Nova Scotia Community College Applied Research Lab. So the problem that we are trying to solve is that companies are under a significant amount of pressure from investors, from regulators, and from customers to reduce their emissions, their carbon emissions. And so they're setting net zero targets, which includes their scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. Their scope 1 and 2 are from their own operations. And so they're really within the control of, to some extent, of the company setting the target. But a minimum of 75% of most companies' emissions are actually from their supply chain. And that's your scope 3. And so companies are setting net zero targets, and they don't really have a great solution for how to engage their supply chain and how to support their supply chain through their decarbonization journey. And so we see two challenges here. One is on the enterprise side. So enterprise customers have set net zero targets, and they actually have very limited visibility into the emissions that are in their supply chain. And they need a way to engage their suppliers. So large enterprises, some of them have thousands of suppliers. So engaging them one-to-one and supporting them in decarbonization is a really tall task. It's costly and time-consuming. And so they are looking for a solution to do this. On the other side, we know that 90% of suppliers are small to medium-sized enterprises. That means that they are cost constrained, so they don't have a lot of capital to invest in their business. And they also don't have the in-house sustainability, for the most part, in-house sustainability expertise to make good decisions on how to decarbonize their business. And so that's really why a QSC was developed. It was to solve these two issues. So really, we tend to, or we believe that we will be selling into the enterprise level customer who has set their net zero target. And a QSC would be deployed by their procurement teams to their suppliers. The suppliers will enter easy to find information about their business into the supplier survey. And we tailored the supplier survey to be easy to use for any manager or owner. So there's no technical jargon. We made sure that the data was very easy to find, and so that was easy to use for everyone. And then our proprietary deep data set and algorithms that will generate not only their baseline carbon emissions, but it will also provide tailored industry specific solutions that the company can deploy to remove the most amount of carbon from their operations for the lowest amount of cost. And all of that information gets aggregated back up to a net zero dashboard for the enterprise customer, so that it provides them visibility into their emissions, but also track progress towards their net zero targets. And so we know that ports are an integral link in the supply chain. So we can envision that ports will be under a significant amount of pressure from both their clients and customers and regulators to reduce their own emissions, because they are a part of the scope 3 emissions of their customers. And so ports will need to make decisions about what is most material for their business, and develop strategies to reduce their carbon emissions accordingly. And so I wanted to pose the question to participants around what type of data and what type of assessment types would be appropriate for the port to utilize to inform their sustainability strategies. And so in my PhD research, I actually do optimization models, circular economy, supply chain optimization models, using multi-criteria decision-making. And so we know that sustainability has many aspects beyond carbon. We tend to use carbon because that, I guess, is most material towards climate change. But also it's a metric that there's data available for, and so it can be calculated. But there are other metrics that are important to sustainability, and so I wanted to pose the question to participants. How would a port decide what is most material to their sustainability strategy? Is data available for them to actually measure and monitor and track their progress on those metrics? And who decides what metrics are most important? And some of the metrics that I consider are social, environmental, economic, and financial, also cultural. But there are other important metrics for biodiversity, water, land use, and well-being, human and planetary and species well-being. So maybe that might be something of interest for participants to look into. And yeah, so I would look forward to hearing what you think. Okay, thanks so much for listening, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Awesome. There we are hearing from Dawn. It feels like she's here, but she's not. But yeah, one of the questions that kind of came up in the chat from Dawn's presentation is, what is circular economy? So I mentioned earlier about how we currently live in a majority of a linear economy. So that means we'll take an item, for example, you buy a shirt, you take it, you use it, and you're done with it, and then you throw it out, or it rips and you throw it out. And then it's kind of like the life of a product ends pretty abruptly. But in a circular economy, it's all about reusing and sharing and kind of repairing things so that it doesn't end. So maybe the shirt you're wearing has a rip in it, you repair it and keep wearing it, or you donate it. That way that it doesn't end up in a landfill. So it's kind of creating that circular economy versus just a linear, which is really important for all the different resources that we have. And it's a term that maybe isn't commonly heard, but it is a really important one. And it's kind of the direction that we want to make sure that we move into with our economy to ensure that we're not just wasting a lot of product. But yeah, so those are that we've now heard from all our speakers. So thank you everyone for taking the time to discuss. And I can open the floor for questions. You can drop them in the chat. You can put them in the Q&A section. We have eyes on both of those. But I see, Scott, you mentioned, you answered kind of one written out, but maybe we can start things off with this one. First off, could you maybe explain more what hydrogen is as a fuel alternative? Like, how are we using hydrogen as a fuel alternative? And then why did you decide to use it for an alternate fuel alternative at the Port of Virginia?
Sure. Yeah, right now we're actually not using it. But we think we're going to need an alternative to battery technology, primarily because while battery technology's made some pretty good advances over the last few years, we're not able to, right now at least, power our equipment fully electric by battery in some of the more demanding areas of the terminal, such as the rail. I mentioned briefly in the presentation, we're currently demoing a handful of UTRs, or basically yard tractors. These are trucks that just move boxes around the terminal. They don't leave the facility. And while using them and moving unloaded or very light containers, we can run an entire shift of labor to move the boxes and then charge those units at the end of the evening at the end of the shift. And then they're ready to go the next day. We cannot do that right now, however, in some of the more demanding areas like in the rail, because the containers weigh so much. We also haven't had an opportunity to test them in super hot weather in Virginia yet, nor have we tested them in extreme cold to any extent. So at this point in time, we're considering what else is out there. In Virginia, we unfortunately are a bit of a cul-de-sac still when it comes to some things like different fuels. Our capability to, for example, just switch to RNG or LNG or any other type of alternate fuel besides ultra low sulfur diesel or gasoline is extremely limited. So even if we talked about renewable diesel, which we would love to just use, it's just not available right now. We're working on that a little bit, but one of the technologies that we do see as potentially promising is hydrogen or hydrogen electric or hydrogen fuel cells, in which we could at least test with a supply available. We also know that we are currently running some equipment in which a few manufacturers make hydrogen kit upgrades for. And so we're looking and working with them on what's possible in regards to essentially dropping out a portion of a hybrid motor and putting in a hydrogen motor, and seeing if we can get some hydrogen deliveries to the terminal. And if it works out and the equipment works out, then we are also in the process of scoping a hydrogen study to see what it would look like for us to produce our own. So we're not really there yet. Canada, you guys up there are much more advanced than we are in regards to hydrogen and the use of hydrogen, as well as certain parts of Europe. Our I guess saving grace could be that in the United States, they DOT, Department of Transportation, has vetted a grant recently in regards to hydrogen hubs that could facilitate the use or easier use and supply of hydrogen in certain areas of the United States, especially along the coasts. So we do have that, and we're tracking that as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's interesting, kind of all the different alternative energy sources that we're trying to figure out, kind of what's the best one for, like we said, it varies. Like electric, it doesn't work well for you because you're lifting really heavy boxes.
Yeah, for example, we've used propane for a number of years in forklifts. It's super easy to deliver it. It comes in a bottle just like your grill does. You turn the knob and you're ready to go. But there's other technologies like electric forklifts. Electric forklifts have been around for decades. Like, I'll tell you a good example of how does an electric forklift hold up in a marine environment. We just retired one from 1973. So it's kind of a little bit in some instances about relearning or rethinking some of what is going on. Electric forklifts have been around and operating not only on the port and in port environments, but throughout really the transportation sector, as well as warehousing and refrigerated operations as well.
Yeah, that might be a good topic someone can dive into as well, kind of looking at different alternative sources for the port and what you think would work best. So thank you for kind of diving into that. One of the questions that we have is, can we ask the help from professionals mentioned in this webinar? This is a perfect time to ask these questions that you might have for them. But if you have specific questions, I'll encourage you to email them to info@deepsense.ca, and then we can pass them on to whoever might be the best person to help answer that. I've just kind of voluntold everyone here that that's going to be the situation. But I'm imagining won't be tough questions, and hopefully perhaps we could help answer them. Now, Derek, this might be a question for you with the port control, but are there any open source data respective to the Port of Halifax and the movement of ships in and around the port?
So data that we can ingest, you mean, to help us with our operations planning? Just a little more context.
Sure. I think kind of data that you guys are using, but maybe open source data that participants are able to use as well.
Okay. Yeah. Well, open source is always a tricky one for me because I'm not sure what's open and not open sometimes, but we do use outside sources for our information. We use AIS feeds, we use Lloyd's database feeds for vessel information. And we have other subscriptions we have from other providers that is not, not free, but, we can always talk about what we could share if it's appropriate. I mean, you can't do analysis if you can't get at data. So one of the things we want to be is a collaborative, partner, because I don't know that we use any specific open source, but we have a lot of partners that share with us, and we're trying to build on that.
And the data that you can find in port control, that's all real-time data. There's not like a historical open source data bank somewhere.
Well, not so much in the true sense of open source. I mean, we have feeds from different services that we pay for. And we have the inputs of our operations. So given that this system went online in the beginning of 2022, we didn't port a lot of information over from previous systems. Kind of what Scott said earlier, good data is hard to find. So why corrupt a database that's brand new with old data that's never been, we have 20 years of legacy systems that we have to work through. And that's one of our modernization strategies, is to migrate away from the old systems. And data in this industry is sometimes surprising to people that are not in this industry. And so you have to really seek out the good data accept certain conditions where you can, and figure out what your tolerance is going to be, and then build going forward, a clean data model. It's complex. It sounds simple enough, but it's not.
Yeah. One of the things they asked about is the movement of ships. An app or a website that I'm partial to is Marine Traffic. I don't know,
Yep.
does the port use that one, or is that just me?
Oh, no,
talking
we
ships? Okay.
we use different sources, but so there's different programs that we use. We work
Mhm.
with a company out of Denmark called EC, and they've been a strategic player for us for several years, and they give us forecasting. It's interesting. A lot of people, and myself included, say, how come we don't know when the vessel's coming, and how come we don't know how many containers are coming off? Well, that's a wonderful question. 150 years later, we still haven't figured that out. But we're trying. And so we have different tools that give us sort of projections and forecasting. So we can see, the more days in advance we can know a vessel's coming, the more efficiently we can plan for it and get that dwell time shortened, get that transfer of product off the vessel onto rail, onto truck, and out of the city in the most efficient way. Because every time a vessel sits, it's burning fuel and doing the wrong thing to our environment. The longer a truck comes into the port and there's no container ready to go, that's an empty container going back, empty truck going back out, that's got to return. So that's wasted fuel, wasted energy. Efficiency is a big factor. And so the more we can get some of our data providers to give us that forecasting information, we can better plan better. And that's what our data integration platform is all about. Our joint operations center is all about, is that day-to-day operational planning and visibility, so we can make joint decisions and make better choices on how we move efficiently, our cargo.
Awesome. And just a quick specific Port of Halifax question. Does Port of Halifax have shore power equipment? If yes, what kind?
Okay, you're over my
Okay.
I'm going to have to defer to the Scots of the world for these. I'm on the IT team.
That's true.
I'm not able to answer those types of questions, but I can, maybe Sherry can take some notes, or I can take some notes, and we can circle back with people. I don't know if Scott can answer it from his perspective, but I certainly cannot, unfortunately, answer that question.
Derek, I read in your sustainability report that you guys do have it, but I don't know how much it serves. So I'm sure it's probably in regard to your cruise portion of your terminal. At least I would guess. And but I don't know about your cargo operations, or if it's available to either. It can be, unfortunately, a lot of the ships that serve the East Coast have not been set up or built with shore power capability. Yeah. And we actually did a survey maybe 3 years ago, and it wasn't very well responded to begin with. But those that did respond did indicate that the ships currently calling the Port of Virginia, the large majority do not have shore power. And it's about back then it was about $1 million upgrade. Yeah. Now, one thing you're going to see is different shipping lines that are going to choose to go with some different things. And they might even start changing and have already started changing some services. So services that were formerly calling the West Coast might start calling the East Coast. We might see them. You guys up in Halifax might see them. So that's another consideration. And I'll shut up so Derek can answer for himself. But
no, Scott, I'm glad you're here. It's interesting. From my point of view, and again, I'm not an environmental specialist or a sustainability specialist, but I work with smart people that are. And so if you build it, will they come? I mean, it's a big investment. As Scott highlighted, will they use it? A lot of these cruise vessels, they're like cities on the water. They have their own infrastructure. Will they come in and use it? If you're going to build something, you got to look at the business case and the payback. It's, you can't do it for free, and you can't do it and not have customers.
One big consideration too is how long are the ships staying where they come?
Right.
And so while we do a lot of volume in Virginia, the ships don't really stay here. Like if you could look at the West Coast, you might have ships that'll stay in the port for 5 days or 6 days being loaded and unloaded. But about 82% of the ships that visit the Port of Virginia are there for less than 24 hours.
Yep.
And the large majority of the remainder are there for less than a day and a half. So then you got to ask yourself, hey, I'm a ship captain. Do I want to cold iron all my boilers for less than a day of time alongside? And there's not going to be a ship captain that wants to do that, because it's a huge wear and tear when you start getting things hot and then getting things cold again, and then they get them hot again. And pretty soon you're doing PMs on boilers or your infrastructure a lot sooner than you needed to. I suspect that if offered an opportunity and we had it available, that there are certain shipping lines in the future that might elect to plug in voluntarily, but not all of them. In fact, a large majority will not.
Awesome. Thank you. That's really fascinating. Cameron, I know you just answered this question and typed out a lovely long answer, but just so everyone else is on the same page, the question is, how do you find creating virtual simulations helps you to ensure a greener port? You mentioned waste management. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So DataFX to date hasn't actively used our software to pursue greener ports. We've just essentially sat down and had discussions about, how we envision it could go. And to emphasize on waste management, the digital twin has so many different capabilities. You're able to optimize waste collection and disposal, and that can just be simply using GPS or on the simulation to track what the most efficient route of driving from point A, being your port with tons and tons of waste, as you know, ports are huge, and delivering that to a fill or wherever that waste needs to be discarded at. And it might not seem like much, but you compound those trips year by year, and the amount of emissions or carbon emissions you're burning is quite high. So with the simulation technology, we're able to actually identify what the most efficient route would be. And then after a few trips, for example, track the data of how much you're loading, how much room you'd still have to load, and then you're able to consolidate that and maximize your load, and then simultaneously reducing your net carbon emissions. And on the other side of that, we're able to use the simulation technology to initially design the new facility. So whether that be incarceration or incineration facilities, recycling plants, composting, et cetera, we can use that simulation to essentially design that, create the whole port or recycling plant before brick hits mortar or anything like that.
Awesome. Thanks, Cameron. We have a couple minutes left with our Q&A here. This is a kind of a good, how did you all get to where you are today? And how do you have any advice for someone graduating soon who's looking to get into the green field? So I feel like everyone kind of came into this field from, well, Scott, you were directly in the field, but everyone else kind of unconventionally made their way into kind of the ports in the ocean sector. And we do have a lot of undergraduates here. So I don't know if anyone has any tips or surprises or things that you've learned since getting into this field that you wish you knew back when you were graduating. Anyone can jump in.
Yeah, sure. I'm an undergraduate student right now, so I guess I might be in the moment to offer some of this advice. So the biggest thing when emerging into this industry, especially, is starting off slow when you're learning everything, because it's a very complex industry. And if you try to take it all in one big bag, it's very hard to process all the different information and all the different activities that actually contribute to the operation of a port. So yeah, biggest tip is essentially start slow, gain and develop an initial understanding, and then build on top of that. And that can be done through networking, talking to your supervisor, talking to, whether that be other friends, we'll say, in the industry. It's just networking is definitely the biggest thing, and talking to people who are smarter than you is definitely my advice, and that's served me well so far.
Yeah, that's well said. I would say similar. We've been very fortunate to have hired a number of recent grads, and it's sometimes an interesting industry where you're learning all the time. And I would dare say anyone that's even been in the business a long time continues to need to learn. So you're never going to know all the answers, and don't expect to. It's realizing that it's a team sport. There's very few heroes anymore. You can't do it alone, not internally, and not without your partners. And just kind of put your toe in the water and walk in. And we throw people in the deep end at the port when they join our IT team, but we do so with a life jacket, and that's how you learn. You got to stretch yourself. So we love to have smart people join our company. And like you just said, I'll repeat, I tend to try to hang out with smart people as much as I can.
Always a good plan of attack. Scott, do you have any words of wisdom for graduating students?
Wisdom. I don't know about wisdom, but here's, how I've tried to at least shape most of my career. When I joined the environmental field, the big sectors were air, water, and waste. And so I initially tried to get experience in air, water, and waste. And guess what? 20 years into it, there's something called decarb, which is a little bit different. And so what Derek said about, I'll say take your opportunities, but don't stop learning, because hey, by the time you get ready to retire, things might have totally changed. So you got to be ready to, help out the Camerons of the world.
Yeah, stuff moves fast, especially in like the tech field and everything, for sure. Gonna always
I
be
think
learning.
This is the most exciting time. I've been in this business a long time. Don't want to show too much of my age, but a long time. And I'm having the most fun not sleeping right now. And I mean that because it's just a very challenging time, and but it's exciting. And we get to save the planet if we do it right. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's exciting. Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff happening right now.
Yeah, my life changed from basically, so a typical environmental job is managing permits for construction projects, doing inspections, ensuring compliance with our ISO environmental management system. But the decarb world, and Derek's right, is very different. And you do potentially have a chance to make a difference. And while, air emissions were never my thing. I grew up in Virginia. I surf still, I fish. I've always been a water quality guy, but right now that's not where it's at. And if I have a chance to make a difference on the air quality side of things, then let's just jump in and do it until I can't do it anymore. So
that's great. That's amazing. Yeah. I think that's a good question to end our Q&A on. Thank you, all three of you, for joining us today and sharing info about all the wonderful things. I think we all learned, I definitely learned a lot, especially kind of like for the future and like where things are going. So thank you again. Now, we still have about 10, 15, 20-ish minutes of content, but you, the speakers, you're free to sign off if you'd like. We are just going to be reviewing the challenge now that we have a better idea of it. But thank you again so much for taking the time to chat with us today, and have a great rest of your evening. And we can go back to our presentation and sharing our screen. Bye. So we still have a couple questions that hopefully we can answer that are challenge specific, but we are, once again, so now we kind of heard from different experts in industry and in ports, and hopefully that gives you a better understanding of a direction you want to choose or a challenge stream you want to go down. You can also combine challenge streams if you think the idea you come up with is kind of relevant to both on the water and around the port. Feel free to bring that in together. But there's a lot of opportunities. There's some prompt questions in there. You can use those. You can come up with, maybe you heard something from one of our speakers just now that really piqued your interest. I was really interested in like what I said. Scott talking about the different fuel alternatives. So that's another road you can go down that isn't really mentioned here, but kind of the world is your oyster, or the challenge is your oyster. A lot of options here. And we had a question about the data. So on our next slide, kind of touch upon it. So one of the main rules of all of our data challenges is you have to use at least one type of data in your final idea, visualization, algorithm, whatever you decide to come up with. We've put together a list of open source data that kind of fits within those categories. Like I mentioned, the port control that Derek mentioned is in there. My favorite website, Marine Traffic's in there. But there's a lot of different options that you can choose from, but you're also welcome to find your own data. So like they mentioned, there's not much, or good data is hard to find. I've tried to dig through different Halifax archives and data that Halifax has, Nova Scotian wide. I've pulled some kind of environmental data, transportation data, community data, kind of a like trend of how where people are living. There's a lot of cool stuff out there. It's a fun research project to kind of pull it all together, but we'll share a link in our chat in just a minute with a bunch of different things. Plus, I'll going to be emailing everyone if you registered through Eventbrite. You're going to be getting an email with the link to this recording and all the different important links that you need, including a link to a list of data. So like I said, we provided a list of data sources you're welcome to use, but you can go find your own open source data. Just make sure you use at least one type and you let us know what that is in the final submission form. Next slide. We have the rules. So our rules, there's a bunch here. So we have make sure that whatever you're creating is your own and you have the rights to it. We don't want to make sure we're not stealing anything. Whatever you create is going to be presented in a video format. So in the summertime, when we do our data challenges, we, instead of having a final live presentation like we have for our past one, because we know people are maybe busier with working with jobs or with co-ops, maybe they're in school, but maybe you don't have as much flexibility. So we'll give you the option to submit a maximum 3-minute video. It can be kind of like what we saw with Dawn talking with the slide. It can be, we've had some edited videos, up to you. But it is a video that will dive into what your technology solution is, your prototype, your visualization, or some kind of plan addressing one of the challenge streams. Where, like I said, really open and flexible. We really want to make sure you have a much room for creativity and you can come up with some pretty great ideas. You can work alone if you'd like. You can work or up to 5 members. It can be 2 people on the team, 3 people, all the way up to 5. But that does mean you'll be splitting the prize money in the end. So keep that in mind. Don't submit anything with some confidential information. Definitely don't want to see any confidential stuff in your final presentations. Like I mentioned, you're supposed to use one source of publicly available data and then let us know. Also, must currently be living in Canada with an active Canadian bank account that could accept a direct deposit. That is the way we will share the winnings in the very end. And because we are all based in Nova Scotia, this is for post-secondary students, part-time or full-time in an academic institution in Atlantic Canada. So New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, or Newfoundland and Labrador. Or they'd have to be recent graduates, so graduated from one of these provinces, an institute from one of these provinces in the last 12 months. So those are our overall rules. Next slide. And then your idea must be, like I said, a video. Afterwards, we're going to be having our judges will watch the videos and the winners will be announced on June 9th. Upload the videos onto YouTube or Vimeo and share a link so we don't have to all download the video, just easier to have a private link on YouTube. Each member of your team, if you have members of your team, has to fill out their own Google form just with who they are and their info, plus submitting a team summary document and emailing it to info@deepsense.ca by the end of the day on Monday, June 5th. So you have about just under 2 weeks to kind of come up with your idea and share it with us in a video format. And I see, is there a definition of the type of eligible academic institution? So it could be, I don't know, we're thinking universities or colleges or any post-secondary institution. If you have specific questions, if you're not sure about if you're considered to be in post-secondary institution, you can email us and let us know, or message us in the chat if you'd like, and we can answer that. But we've had students from Nova Scotia Community College participate. We've had students from Nova Scotia College of Art and Design University, or NASCAD, as I never know what that stands for. Always mess it up. We've had university students from New Brunswick and Newfoundland and PI participate. So we're pretty open. So just let us know if you're not sure if you follow one of those categories. Just shoot me an email and we can discuss. But yeah, so filling out a Google form and the team summary, which is just a document where it kind of gives, you can write about your solution in about 250 words and share the link to your presentation as well, and tell us what data you use. That's all in that doc. And these are all links that you'll be getting in an email as well. Next slide, please. Prizes. This is what everyone's always very excited about. So prizes, we have our judges who will be watching the videos, like I said, after you submit them, and they'll be judging on presentation, creativity, and the prototype. So that could be an idea, a solution, a visualization, an overall plan. Like I said, we're really open to it. First place is $750. Second place is $500. Top creative design is $500, and then judges choice is $500. So our judges choice category, it's kind of open to the judges to choose how they want to use that, because sometimes we have some really excellent ideas that might not perfectly fall into the other three categories. So we want to make sure our judges have the flexibility to acknowledge some amazing work. So that's how the prizes are laid out. And then our next slide, and I'm just going to drop some links in the chat there. So our next slide is the challenge schedule. So kind of seeing it all laid out. So Wednesday, March 21st, this is the kickoff. That's where we are right now. We'll be wrapping up shortly. And then you have kind of time to work on your idea. We're always available for questions. Same email, info@deepsense.ca. But we want to make sure you have everyone's submissions for Monday, June 5th by midnight, essentially, so end of day. And like I said, that's going to be the team concept submission, which is linked in the chat, and the individual registration that every team member has to fill out, also linked in the chat. You'll also find the data sources that I pulled together in the chat as well, and the challenge description if you ever want to like look back to the main challenge that you would have seen on our Eventbrite. That's going to live there as well as on our website, but that's a document that you can reference as well. And then once everything's submitted June 5th, I'm going to take everyone's files, organize them, and send them off to our judges, who will have then a couple days to watch everything, review using our rubric and the criteria I mentioned. They're going to come together and decide on the 4 winners, and then they will all be announced on social media through email and social media and through email. Yes, those are the 2 ways that we have. So that is the challenge schedule. Again, on the final slide, that is the email that we're available with, info@deepsense.ca. We are there answering questions. We can also, like we said, forward any specific questions you might have to one of our experts, or hopefully we can find someone else to answer it if we don't know the answers. But we have a wide network of people who can help us out. But yeah, so that kind of brings us to the end. And Emily, you can stop sharing your screen so we can all kind of see each other, and let's see, review the question. So do we get general data? So like I said in that video, we have, or in that video, oh my gosh, in that document, there is a bunch of different types of data that you can choose from, but again, you can go find your own. And then, can we make multiple team submissions? Oh, this is something we haven't been asked before. I feel like, no, I don't know. What are we thinking, team? Emily, Kat, thoughts, opinions?
I would say I would agree with no. I think the idea of this is that you're coming up with your best proposal, your best plan for, how we can make a greener port city. So I think choose your best idea and send us that one and save your other ideas for future
That's true.
challenges.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with that. Maybe finding a way to like bring all those ideas into one. Or you don't have to work in groups, as Lucia said, you can always work alone. So if there is conflicts in terms of what you feel is the best one to submit, then you can always have everyone submit separate ones as well.
Awesome. And so the final submission is a video in the concept submission form. That's right. So you're going to submit the video, which is a link that's going to be linked in that concept submission form. So it'll all be there. And then filling out just kind of your not personal info, but just like who you are. We have a lot of metrics we're tracking here. So we want to make sure you are from a graduate from a university, what program, and all that. So yeah, those are the final kind of pieces. So send us the Google form and email us that document where you'll have a link or a place to add the link for the video.
Yeah,
But
and just
the video. Yeah.
Just to reiterate what Lucia said earlier, you don't need to have a public YouTube channel. Like, it doesn't need to be on a public YouTube channel. It can be a private link. So if you don't want the whole world to see it, that's fine. You just need to send it on to us.
Yeah. And once you send the video or send the email, I'll always reply to them within like a day. So if you don't get a reply from me, that means it might have ended up in the junk mail. I didn't see it, or it didn't send. So send a follow-up and just keep sending emails and then bug me on LinkedIn until I reply to be like, where's my submission? We want to make sure we don't miss anyone or leave anyone out. I have learned to check the junk mail though. That past experiences has taught me to check the junk mail. Any final questions specific? I see we have some that are kind of for our speakers that unfortunately we didn't get to, but a lot of really fascinating questions. I think we've covered, covered the submission video with a summary document. That's right. And anyone else? Oh, registration. No. So when you originally registered, you registered for kind of this event. So you have access to the Zoom recording. Now it's kind of up in the air. So if you attended this and you're like, yes, this is great, this is exactly what I want to work on, opportunity to win some money, then do that. And then on June 5th or before June 5th, if you finish early, you can send us the video and fill out that Google form that was linked once you are all set. And that's kind of like the deadline is June 5th. So if you decide maybe you're not sure you want to participate yet, there's no rush. You have time up until June 5th. Maybe decide before June 5th so you have time to work on something. But yeah, so we're really flexible. We don't want you guys having to like submit constantly, having to register for things. So we're trying to limit it as much as possible. How can we get this meeting recording? After this is done, it's gonna upload to the cloud, and then I'm going to download it to my computer, and then I'm going to upload it to YouTube and share it with everyone tomorrow morning with all the links I shared in the chat as well. So we had about 100 people sign up for this, and we had, I think, about 50 come at our highest tonight. So definitely a lot of people who missed out. So we want to make sure everyone has the opportunity. So you'll get a link to that tomorrow morning. Any other questions? I hope you guys are excited to tackle some green port challenges. And if we don't have any final questions, again, you can email us at info@deepsense.ca. I'll add that to the chat. But I monitor that email, and so I can take the questions and forward them to whoever is best suited. But I think we're good. I think we've answered ones that we are able to answer. And thank you everyone for taking time on this Wednesday evening to learn about ports. and hopefully you're inspired to come up with some green solutions, because I think there's definitely a lot of opportunities out there. As we heard, there's a lot of different avenues you can go down, a lot of different things you can tackle, and ideas. Do we need to come up with facts and figures for how we are saving the environment? That is a big question. You don't need to come up with facts or figures. If you just have kind of, it really depends on what your idea is. If you want to come up with facts and figures to help support your idea, that's great. But there's no pressure. We're not expecting you to do intense research and spend hours and hours and hours on this. This is meant to just kind of help stimulate some idea generation and get you thinking. So some facts and figures might be helpful in explaining your idea if you think it's beneficial. If you don't find them beneficial, you don't have to create any. It's really up to you. You can check out, today we shared on our Instagram the winners of the last data challenge, what she created, and she created data visualization. So you can check out, see what that looks like to be inspired. And then if you go to, let me get the link, the Deep Sense website, we have an Ocean of Data page where you can kind of see what past challenges looked like. Maybe that will help you determine how much or what you need to do. So, and this will also be updated with the video once it's ready. I will be adding it in there. But you can see past challenges there as well. And yeah. All right, I think that brings us to the end. Thank you, everyone, again. Thank you, Emily and Kat, for helping out today.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, I'm excited to see everyone's submissions. And I think that was a really great intro to all the different things, and the best ways to approach this is what you're excited about and what you're passionate about. So there's a lot of really different ways of looking into this challenge.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone.
Yes, thanks. Have a great night. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.